Hello friends, subscribers and new viewers of this channel. In this Linux and Raspberry Pi tutorial, we explain how to remotely access and connect to Raspberry Pi Linux Ubuntu desktop from a Windows computer. In this tutorial, we are using Raspberry Pi 5. We have installed Linux Ubuntu 24.04 on the Raspberry Pi 5 computer. However, everything explained in this tutorial applies to any other Linux distribution and to Raspberry Pi 4. Then, in this tutorial, we are connecting a Raspberry Pi 5 computer with a Windows computer through a local area network connection. A local area network connection is often called as LAN. That is, we are connecting them through a home Wi-Fi which is overseen by a router. You can also establish the connection if both computers are connected to the router through an Ethernet cable. However, everything explained in this tutorial can easily be generalized in the case of connecting to the Raspberry Pi 5 outside of a LAN network. That is, you can connect to it from a computer through the internet as long as you know the public Raspberry Pi 5 IP address, and you can find it out with a single command line. And here's a brief demonstration of how the connection works. Currently, I'm on my Windows computer. Then I'm going to start remote desktop connection. Over here, I enter the IP address of Raspberry Pi on my local area network connection. That is, this is a local Wi-Fi connection inside of my house. This is not a public address. Then I click connect. Then I need to enter the username and password of my Raspberry Pi, and here it is. I'm in my Raspberry Pi, and this is my Raspberry Pi desktop. You can, for example, start terminal over here, and you can see that I'm currently running Linux Ubuntu, and here's the version. You can surf internet, you can do all sorts of things. For example, this is my website. I advise you to check it out. I can click here, I can go to any web page, I can Google, I can do all sorts of things. And then once I'm done, if you want to learn more about Raspberry Pi, we have created separate video tutorials on how to start with Raspberry Pi 5 and how to install Linux Ubuntu on Raspberry Pi 5. Links will be given in the description below this video. Here is the main motivation for learning the material presented in this tutorial. The material presented in this tutorial is very important if you want to remotely connect to a Raspberry Pi from another Windows computer. For example, your Raspberry Pi might be controlling a robot or a surveillance system, and you want to access the Raspberry Pi and to perform a remote configuration. Or Raspberry Pi 5 can be running robot operating system. Of course, you can do that by using a terminal SSH connection. However, you cannot access the graphics user interface of the Raspberry Pi so easily by using the SSH connection. In this tutorial, we will teach you how to directly access the graphics user interface and the desktop of the Raspberry Pi 4 or 5. Here is the main idea for establishing the connection. To establish the remote desktop connection on the Raspberry Pi 5 and Linux side, we are using the xrdp program. The xrdp is a software package that enables us to set up and use a remote desktop protocol in Linux Ubuntu. xrdp is developed by Microsoft, and it allows us to remotely access and interact with the server's graphics user interface. xrdp is an abbreviation or the acronym for X Remote Desktop Protocol, and X stands for X, R stands for remote, D stands for desktop, and P stands for protocol. On the other hand, we will use Windows Remote Desktop Connection and the program to establish the connection from a Windows computer. Every Windows comes with Remote Desktop Connection, and you will not need to install anything on the Windows side. Okay, let's start with explanations and with installation. First of all, you need to log in to the Raspberry Pi 5. Currently, I'm recording my screen on my Raspberry Pi 5. Let's open a terminal. And over here, I'm going to resize this terminal such that you can see what I'm typing, and at the same time, you can see all the commands that are written over here. Whenever you want to install a program on Raspberry Pi, you need to run this sudo apt update, enter your password, and after this command you need to run another command, and that command is this one, sudo apt upgrade. You need to perform these two commands such that everything is up to date. So let's type sudo apt upgrade. And good. Next, let's install the necessary packages. The main package that we need to install is xrdp. As mentioned at the beginning of this tutorial, this is the program that will be used to establish the remote connection. So let's type sudo apt install xrdp. And let's click on yes. And let's wait a while. For those of you who are interested to know, I'm running Linux Ubuntu 24.04 on Raspberry Pi 5. My Raspberry Pi 5 has 8 GB RAM. Next, we need to install X server packages. Most likely you have these packages. However, let's try to install them to make sure that you have them. So you need to execute also this command. And let's click on yes. And finally, let's install xorg xrdp. That is the support of xrdp for xorg. However, this package might be already installed. Good. Let's continue. Next, we need to add xrdp to the SSL cert group. An SSL certificate, or a secure socket layer certificate, is a digital file that verifies a website's identity and encrypts data sent between a user's browser and a website server. An SSL certificate is a file that enables a website to use the HTTPS encryption, which is more secure than HTTP. Consequently, to make sure that xrdp is added to the SSL cert group, we need to type this. Good. Next, we need to start xrdp. To do that, we need to execute this command. Then, we need to check if xrdp is active. We can simply type this. Next, we need to make sure that the xrdp will start under startup, and consequently we need to execute this command. Okay, the next step is to go to the Windows computer and to check the IPv4 address of the Windows computer. I will explain how to do that later on. Now I'm on my Windows computer and I need to check the IP address on my Windows computer such that I can properly configure the firewall on my Raspberry Pi computer. Let's find the local IP address. To find the local IP address, I need to open a Windows command prompt. You don't need a PowerShell for that. Simply search for command prompt. And over here, we need to execute this command, ipconfig, and these addresses will be listed. Note over here that none of these addresses is my global IP address, and you cannot access my computer, or some hacker cannot access my computer, since all of these addresses are within the global address, and you don't see the global address over here. First of all, we need to find the type of connection. Over here, I'm connecting my Windows computer to the router by using the wireless adapter. Consequently, over here I need to find this section, and under this section you will see this IPv4 address. We don't need the exact IPv4 address, we just need these three numbers. That is, we need 192, 168, and we need 0. Why we don't need all four numbers? That is why I don't need number 145. As you will see later on, I'm going to enable all the connections from all the addresses that have the same these three numbers. That is, from all the addresses that have 192, 168, and 0. And over here I'm going to specify the range from 0 to the maximum value, and I think the maximum value is 255. This will enable all the computers on my local LAN wireless network to connect to my Raspberry Pi. Now, another type of connection that you have is the Ethernet cable connection. For example, in case if my computer was connected to the router by using the Ethernet cable, then I will have to specify this address over here. That is, first of all, in your case, analyze what type of connection do you have. Are you connecting by using wireless, or you're connecting to your local network by using Ethernet cable? Then, depending on the case, you will either select these numbers or these numbers. Of course, the numbers might be different in your case. However, the principle is the same. So what I will do now, I'm just going to write these three numbers, and then later on I'm going to enter them in my Raspberry Pi firewall settings. This will enable me to access my Raspberry Pi from any computer that's on my local wireless LAN network. And let's execute this command. Okay. In my case, the rule is already added to my system, so that's why you see here skipping adding the existing rule. However, in your case, you will see that this rule will be added. Next, we need to run this sudo ufw enable. This will actually enable, and you can see that the firewall will be active and enabled on the system startup. Now, let's check the status to make sure that everything is set up correctly, and over here I can see my port, I can see the action allow, and I can see that any address inside of this range is being allowed to connect to my Raspberry Pi 5. Perfect. The next two steps are super important. If you don't perform these steps, you will not be able to connect remotely to Raspberry Pi 5. Namely, a lot of people are skipping these steps, and when they try to connect, they might see a blue screen, or they might not be able to open a terminal. The first step that we need to do is to edit this script file. This script file is executed once our remote desktop connection starts. The name of this script file is start.wm. So let's edit this file. Now, over here on the top of this file, we need to add these two lines. These two lines will fix the blue screen problem. They will tell the xrdp how to properly set up the connection and what is the GNOME shell session we are using. We are using Ubuntu, and this is very important thing. HDD current desktop should be Ubuntu GNOME. This is very important. Save this file by pressing Ctrl S, or you can simply press Ctrl O to write out, and you will specify the file name to write, and that's it. You can exit by pressing Ctrl X. Of course, you can use any other program to edit this file. And that other program can be, for example, gedit. For the illustration, I'm going to use gedit to edit an additional file. Next, we need to create and edit another configuration file. For that purpose, I'm going to install gedit, just as an illustration and to show you that you can use different programs to edit files. Then after that, let's make sure that we are in the home folder by typing cd tilde and then typing ls-la, And over here, we're going to create another configuration file. The name of this file will be .xsession. So let's type gedit .xsession, and over here we need to add only a single line. That line is this thing, gnome-session. So let's add this line over here, then let's save, and let's close this file. And then let's try to open the file with nano to make sure that everything is fine. Yes, you can see here that we have GNOME session. Let's exit by pressing Ctrl X. Next, we need to locate the local IPv address of our Raspberry Pi. This local IPv4 address is on the local area network. That is, this is not your global network, or better to say global IP address that is seen outside of your workplace or outside of your house. This address is within the local area network. That is, this is address that's underneath your internet router. If, for example, you want to connect to the Raspberry Pi outside of your local area network, for example, from some computer that's 1,000 miles away from your home, you will need to find the global IP address of your house, that is of your router, and then you will need on top of that to know this address. That is the local address. In our case, I will be just using a computer that is in another room, my Windows machine, and I'm going to connect through my Raspberry Pi that is in, for example, somewhere else, located somewhere else in the house. Consequently, I will not need the global IP address. To figure out the local IP address, you need to type this thing, hostname-i. And over here, you can see the IP address. And this is the address we will use to connect to a Raspberry Pi. Another way to find the address is to type ifconfig. So let's type ifconfig. Next, we need to reboot our Raspberry Pi. To do that, we need to execute sudo reboot. However, over here, you have to be careful about one thing. Once you reboot your system, do not log in. If you log in, you will not be able to access remotely Raspberry Pi while you're logged in. Consequently, always log out when you want to connect to Raspberry Pi 5 through another computer. And this is very important. A lot of people are actually trying to connect to Raspberry Pi while you're logged in. For example, right now, if I would try to connect to my Raspberry Pi after rebooting the system, I will not be able to do that. Namely, on the Windows side, I will be able to enter the username and the password. However, the remote desktop connection program will automatically close. This is because you're currently logged in. Consequently, always log out. And let's reboot the system, and in the sequel I will show you how to remotely connect to my Raspberry Pi. Again, I'm going to reboot the system, and I'm not going to log in inside of my Raspberry Pi 5. I will just leave the login screen. And finally, we are ready to remotely connect to the Raspberry Pi 5. To do that, click on Start and search for Remote Desktop Connection. Click on the Remote Desktop Connection. Over here, enter the IP address of Raspberry Pi. This is the IP address we found on Raspberry Pi by typing hostname-i, and let's enter this address. It's 192.168.0.217. Let's click on Connect, and I'll click here. Don't ask me again for connections to this computer. I trust this computer. The certificate looks good. Click on Yes. Over here, enter the username. This is the username you're using to access Raspberry Pi through a regular login. And then over here, I will enter the password. And voila. Over here, you need to be patient. And after some time, you will see the Linux screen. And here it is. Looks beautiful. Looks amazing. Here it is. Okay, now let's test it. Let's open the terminal. Here's the terminal. Let's see what's written over here. Here it is. Let me do this. I can see this file we just edited. So let's try to do nano.xsession, and to see this file, here it is. Let's close the terminal. Close the terminal. Let's, for example, try to access internet. Over here I will try to start Brave, which is my favorite web browser. I will enter here information, and here it is. Over here I can, for example, go to my website or to Google or anywhere else, anywhere where I want to go. Let me go to my website, and here it is. Now the connection is a bit slower. Actually, it's not slower. Everything works fine. Perfect. Okay, that's all for today, and thanks for watching.